question, can a police department engage in racial profiling without an officer ever making a racially profiled stop? And the answer to that is yes. And it goes back to the comment that the student on your end made before we lost you, which is right where I was coming back to. Police departments can absolutely racially profile without their officers being aware of what's going on by the way they put their personnel out there. Let me get back to me. I noticed I was looking at the back of my head. I knew that wasn't going to work. By a police department assigning more officers to a African American community than they do a white community, obviously you're going to get more stops, you're going to get more arrests than an African American community. As a result of looking at the data, it looks like the crime rate is higher in that African American community, which probably it's not, but because you have more officers, you have more stops, you have more arrests. If you would flip-flop it and put more officers in the white community, chances are the white community's crime rate would go up too. They would be more proactive and catch more crime. So a police department can absolutely be a part of that, depending upon how they deploy their forces. All right? So now we're going to talk about specific officer behavior. And this is officer behavior that gets us into, can get an officer into trouble, that gets us into our decision making. And I asked for somebody to tell me about Terry versus Ohio. And I asked Mr. Brewer if he could. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, tell me.
Terry versus Ohio is about Terry stops where, as reasonable occurrence, where a police officer pulls over a vehicle for, let's just say, giving you a warning for a tail lights out. But as the officer walks up to that vehicle and starts noticing strange behaviors, small odor, something's off. But as it says, they can't officially write them anything for that. And within a reasonable amount of time that they can hold them, that the officer keeps making requests and requests. But now, as what happens is, in Terry versus Ohio, he wrote him the ticket, gave him the summons for it, and he was supposed to let him on his way. But as he caught a, I can't remember what it was. Let's say marijuana or something simple. He calls for a canine dog, but they were actually supposed to be allowed to leave, and he detained them until a canine could arrive.
All right. So in Terry versus Ohio, and he told you to give you a brief synopsis of what went on in Terry versus Ohio. But here's the piece about Terry that I want you to understand. SCOTUS, who's SCOTUS? Supreme Court. That's good. SCOTUS said in the Terry ruling that an officer absolutely can use his training, and you hit on this, that an officer can absolutely use his training and his experience in his decision-making process to pull over a vehicle. Okay? He can absolutely use his training and his experience. Now that changed the way we look at traffic stops. That changed the way we do traffic stops. Because periodically, the stop should be based on three things. Using imperial information. What's imperial information? Ideal, fixed, set, constant, unbiased. Before the Terry decision, stops were based on imperial data. And there were three pieces of imperial data. Stops were based on prior knowledge, you had to have some prior knowledge of some criminal behavior about what was going on before the interaction. Number two, observation. You observed the person acting in a very suspicious or unreasonable manner. And number three, the time and place of the incident. Like I told you several times, you know, those three guys hanging out at that convenience store at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening is not really that suspicious because of the time and place. However, when the place doesn't necessarily have to change, but when the time changes, it can create more suspicion. Okay? So the time and place can also be factored in that imperial data. Yes, observation. 1 is prior knowledge, 2 is observation, and 3 is time and place of the incident.
There was just a ruling by the West Virginia Supreme Court on those Terry stops last week over a case in Morgantown.
Really? What
Did
was
you
the
read
ruling?
it? Well, the cop was in the area because there was a call of a domestic violence issue. Apparently the guy involved in the domestic violence issue had fled the scene. Well, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, cop pulls the car over in the area, just checking to see if maybe it was him. Well, it turned out the guy was drunk. He gets a DUI. Well, Supreme Court ruled that was no good stop. He had no reason for that.
Right. Yeah, the issue is, and I can told you that was going to be the ruling. The issue is he did not receive a BOLO, or be on the lookout, or have any reason to believe that was the subject who was at the domestic, right? So all of our Terry stops have got to be based on PC. I mean, they all have to be based on, or I say PC, but reasonable suspicion is really what we got to have, right?
And they're getting stricter on it too.
Absolutely, they're getting stricter on it. The U.S. Supreme Court, I told you all earlier, has ruled on these Terry stops as well, saying that you can't hold someone if you pull somebody over for a minor traffic violation, just like we talked about with Terry. Once that traffic violation's over, you issue them the summons, you can't continue to hold them. They're free to go. You can't hold them until a drug dog gets there, even if it's only 3 minutes. You've unlawfully detained those people. You violated their 14th Amendment rights. Yes.
Do you think Terry stops should be stricter?
I like a Terry stop, and I don't necessarily think a Terry stop should be stricter. What I think has to happen is we have to educate our officers on how to properly use a Terry stop. A Terry stop is a legal, useful, legitimate use of police force as long as it's not abused. The problem with a Terry stop is that you get into officers who want to abuse a Terry stop. Does that make sense? As long as we educate our officers so that Terry stops aren't abused and so that they're used for what they're intended for, I absolutely like a Terry stop.
Wouldn't stricter policies cut down on the abuse?
I don't think so, because Terry stop is based on officer discretion, officer decision at that moment. And by putting more, you can't, in police work is one of the very few jobs that you can't put a policy in place to cover every potential situation. Does that make sense? It's like nursing. I know nurses have a lot of rules they have to go by, but if you can't put enough policies in place to cover every possible situation a nurse might happen upon, right? Because she sees a lot of different stuff, makes a lot of different stuff happens fast. Same thing with police work. You can't create a policy to cover every potential situation. The possibilities are so infinite that you could never cover them all. Does that make sense? So what you have to do is you have to educate. You have to educate. That's why I feel very strong about what I'm doing here. I feel like that when you all graduate, when you all go to the field, if I'm ever called to testify about whether or not I talked to you about Terry stops and how to ethically use them, I can say, yeah, I trained them. I told them. I gave them the information. And believe it or not, everybody who's ever trained you can be called to testify. It is possible when you're in those types of cases. Yes.
We're just referring to the amount of time that you've written the ticket, and at that point, you can't.
Stop sober.
Right. And I remember we discussed this at one point, but I can't remember what we came up with a result. Can't you take your time with that ticket? I mean, can you take a half an hour as long as it takes you to do it?
I mean, the courts are going to rule that unreasonable. The courts are going to know that you're stalling for time.
So the person might know how long it takes to write a ticket. They don't know.
Well, what you have is you may still write the ticket, the arrest may still go down, the person still goes to jail for whatever. But they're going to get a lawyer, and that lawyer knows what you've done.
Okay.
And you're going to have to go to court, and then you're going to have to start answering some really hard questions. Does that make sense? The other thing that happens in police work a lot is Monday armchair quarterbacking. You have a lot of lawyers who have a lot of time to evaluate what you did under pressure. You made a decision under extreme pressure within about 3 to 4 seconds, and a lawyer sitting in a nice safe office somewhere gets to evaluate what you did for hours to pick the mistakes out of it. You see what I'm saying? And that happens a lot in police work. It happens a lot. you know, I don't have any problems with lawyers, but it brings to life, we have to be well trained, we have to be good at what we do. And I know we're kind of off topic, but I'll tell you this and we'll get back on topic. One of the best lessons I ever learned in my life was the first DUI I ever arrested. I arrested that DUI. I did everything I was trained to do. I did it by the book. I had the reports. I had everything ready to rock and roll. When we went to court, he hired a high-dollar lawyer, and that lawyer made me look like an idiot. He tore me up. He embarrassed me in court. And I walked off that stand saying, that will never happen again. I'm going to be good at these stops. He may embarrass me once, but he'll never get me again. So I went to our prosecuting attorney and I said, you tell me what I got to know to keep that from never happening again. And I got trained, right? I took it upon myself. I trained myself. That never happened again. Now, did I win every DUI case? No. But ain't nobody ever embarrassed me on the stand again. You see what I'm saying? And that was a good lesson to learn early. You learn your craft. You learn your trade. You get good at what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You train, educate, so that you are effective when you do your job. Yes, sir.
So you did everything by the book, like I said, and the attorney destroyed you,
Right.
embarrassed you.
Right.
So does it need to go back to the better teaching on by the book? You did everything you were taught.
I did everything I was taught.
You had to seek out extracurricular activity to make yourself good at these stops.
Right. Well, the issue behind that was, at that time, I had my associate's degree. At that time, I only had 150 hours of basic training, very little patrol time. That's why the argument is made, and that's why I would tell you all, you're all on the right track. You need to have a 4-year degree before you're a police officer. You all are getting training I didn't have. You all are getting classroom time I didn't have. You all are learning from mistakes that I've made. I can stand up here and give you that information and keep you from making those same mistakes. And you're getting more education than I got. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with an associate's degree. Don't get me wrong. I ain't knocking those people. But I wasn't ready for this lawyer. And the training you get from your department is not enough. It's, you know, I'm going to tell you on all of that, just like I tell you on defensive tactics. You know this and know it for real. You learn just enough in the basic academy about defensive tactics for somebody to whip your butt. Exactly what you learn in defensive tactics. You better go out and learn some more on your own. Because the training you get at the academy is just enough to get you hurt. Because I've told you all this before, and I'm going to tell you again. If you ever fight somebody, if you're ever in a street fight with somebody and they do this, you're probably all right. But if they do this, you better back up. Because it's getting ready to hurt. Because what's this?
Stance.
This is a stance where they know some type of martial arts, right? And when they do this, if you don't back up, it's going to leave a mark and it's going to hurt. It's bad. So what I'm telling you is that the training I had at that point didn't prepare me for how good this lawyer was, one. And two, this lawyer was really good at DUIs because he got paid big money to do them. And he had a month to pick apart what it took me 2 hours to do, right? You have to be really good at your game because he's got a month, 2 months, 6 months to pick apart what you did in 2 hours.
Well, and they go to school to do that too.
Well,
You have to go to school to be a lawyer, right?
yes, but he focused his specialty on DUI.
Yeah.
I mean, to walk in his office and sit down for a DUI case was $25,000 right off the jump. But then he also promised you were probably going to walk too. And most of the time he was right. Now your question, sir. He knew what questions to ask that I was not prepared for. He knew what questions, and what a lawyer does, what a good lawyer will do, and I learned this as I go along. What a good lawyer will do is they will ask you a question 10 different ways. They'll ask you the same question and rephrase it 10 different times. And they expect you to get the same, they expect you not to give the same answer to all 10 questions. And when they get a difference in the answer, a little variance in the answer, then they start twisting everything you say up into a knot. And they'll ask you, if they ask you 70 questions, they may only be 7 questions phrased 10 different ways each. And they try to look for any variance in your answer, and then they start tearing you up. you have to be good at what you do. You have to be good at what you testify to. You have to be sure of what you're doing. And if you're not, the defense attorney will destroy you. Because, again, one, he's had a month, 2 months, 6 months to really evaluate what you did in a hurry, under pressure. And he can't win. Now, do they win all the time? Absolutely not. Police officers are good at their job, and that's what I'm trying to make sure you all are good at your job when you get up there on the stand. You got a question? Well, tell me what it was. I'll bring it on. Okay. Talk real loud. I can't. Okay. All right.
Does the department offer you any time to prepare your case while you're on the block, or is that something that you have?
No, that's something you have to do at home. Typically, it's something you do at home.
That's a lot of homework.
Homework. Most departments are so strapped for personnel, they squall when you give them a subpoena and have to go to court and have to pay you for a day in court. I mean, they gripe about that. It's just that they're so short-staffed. You know, that's the situation.
So I have a question real quick. What would you consider pretty much this area, as far as a service department or a?
I'd be afraid to answer any of those questions because,
Because I was trying to think myself.
well, and my opinion is not, my opinion,
Yeah, right.
my opinion and $1 will get you a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
You form your own opinion. You
Yeah.
look at those departments, you look at the departments in your area in Beckley, and you form your own opinion, whether they're legalistic, whether they're service, you know what they are, you know what they are. And the problem that you run into is just like, I was talking to a guy the other day, and we were talking about, a particular officer that we both know who's retired. And it didn't matter what his department was, he was legalistic. He was a legalistic personality. He would write his own mother a ticket for speeding if she was going 60 to 55. That's just the way he operated. And while you think, well, that's insane, at least he was consistent. You knew what kind of dude he was every day. You know what I'm saying? There wasn't no every day that he flip-flopped. He was the same dude every day, and you knew what kind of dude he was. So you knew what you were getting when you run into him. Is there advantages and disadvantages to both? Absolutely. The main thing you need to be is consistent as a police officer. Be who you're going to be and be that every day. If you're going to be legalistic, be legalistic. If you're going to be service, but be that every day. That way people can know what they got when they got you. Right? All right. So, with the introduction of Terry stops, the court said that police may also consider these 4 things when making a stop. They may look at nonverbal cues. Yeah, with Terry stops right now. Yeah. They may look at nonverbal cues. They may look at personal experience. They can examine uncertain or unfamiliar behavior. Now that's a little odd, so let me give you a little hint. I've seen this one. I run into these 2 guys who were drinking, and they were trespassing in this fella's yard, and they were sitting in his yard drinking, and they didn't know the guy. So he called the police and said, I want these 2 drunks out of my yard. So I went down and was getting ready to arrest him, and I arrested the first one, and while I was putting him in the car, the second one kept running over to this glider and sitting down. And he would get up, walk back over to me, and he'd run over the glider and sit down. And then he would run back over to me and run back to the glider and sit down. Does that seem a little unusual? That's unexplainable behavior, unusual behavior. He got my attention. So I arrested him for drunk in public. I patted him down real good and I didn't find nothing. I went over to the glider and I thought, I'm going to check this glider out. There's something going on here. I don't know what, but something, right? So when I picked up the glider, I started looking under it and behind it, and I picked up one end of it because it was made on a big rail. Y'all know what I'm talking about, a glider, one of the big metal gliders, like 3 people could sit in. When I picked it up, first thing I did was mash my finger, y'all. Be careful when you pick those up, it hurts, all right? I mashed my pointer finger, it hurt like crazy. Second thing that happened was a bag of pop fell out of the arm, right? I didn't have nothing but suspicion. And I didn't really have a whole lot of that. All I knew was he was acting weird. What are you doing going back over that glider and sitting back down? right? But my suspicion led me to discover the marijuana. So you look at unusual behavior, you look at unknown behavior, you look at behavior that don't make sense, and it creates that element for you to have some reasonable suspicion. And the last thing they let you examine is things that just don't make sense. Things that just don't make sense. When you're trying to add 2 and 2 and you keep getting 5, you better check it out. Right? Oh yes, the SCOTUS ruling on Terry versus Ohio broadened the opportunity for decision making in those stops. Great. Now, as long as police officers don't abuse that, you're in pretty good shape. But what happens is you have all this broad area of decision making. And remember back last week when I was talking to you all about your backpack? We all still got it on. And all of our life's experience come with us. And now we've got all this broad decision making, and we've got our backpack right here with our biases, our prejudices, our preconceived ideas right there, right behind us. And it's all the time weighing on us. It's all the time weighing as a factor in the decisions that we make, the things that we do. Does it present us with an opportunity to make poor decisions? Absolutely. Absolutely. How do we prevent that? We educate ourselves. We educate ourselves and we talk about how we do things the right way and what is actually the wrong way. So, having considered all of these factors after the Terry stop, you run into some racial situations where you are looking at suspicious behavior that might not really be suspicious behavior. Let me give you an example. There was a 2000 study by a man named Rawls. You need to know this too. 2000 study by a man named Rawls. R-A-W-L-S, Rawls. And in his 2000 study, he said that there is a divergence in even simple tasks between racial groups. What does the word divergence mean? Separation, difference. Yes? There is a divergence, even in simple tasks, between racial groups. There is a divergence, even in simple tasks, between racial groups. The example he gave was communication. I am a 40-something, I won't tell you how old I am. I'm a 40-something white guy. I am an officer, I pull over a 19-year-old African-American young man. Now, he refuses to make eye contact with me. He has poor posture. He's standing slumped over. He won't make eye contact, and he keeps fidgeting with his hands. In my training, in my experience, that leads me to believe that he is behaving suspiciously. Correct? However, culturally speaking, this young man may be frightened. He may be intimidated. This could be his first encounter with the police. There may be nothing going on at all. But I read it as suspicious behavior. You with me? So I then began to do those searches on that suspicious behavior. We have to be aware of the cultural differences in people when we make our stops. Just because somebody doesn't make eye contact with you doesn't make them necessarily a suspect. Just because somebody has poor posture or they fidget with their hands nervously. I pulled over a guy one time and we were sitting having a conversation and I noticed that he was sweating profusely. And I don't mean like He had a little perspiration on his lip and his forehead. I mean, like it was dripping off of him, dripping off his face. He hadn't done anything. I was questioning about something that he knew something about, and for whatever reason, his stress level went up. When his stress level went up, he began to perspire. Would some police officers take that as suspicious behavior? Absolutely. Was it? I don't think so, because he was being cooperative. He was talking about what he knew. He was giving me the information he had. I think his stress level went up, and it was his body's involuntary response. But I could have looked at it as, dude, the way you're sweating, you're lying. You know? I could have twisted it that way had I wanted to. Yeah, well, and I know I've told you that story before. I used to shake every once in a while, too. First lady I ever pulled over in my life, I pulled her over and I went up to the window and said, driver's license, registration, please. And she handed her driver's license out. She was shaking like that. And I reached out to get it. I was shaking like that. It was all there. I didn't know which one of us was shaking the worst, you know? It was bad. So, officers sometimes consider these extra legal factors when making a stop. Here's where we get into factors that are illegal. Factors that officers sometimes consider. They pull them out of their backpacks and consider them. And they're extra legal, which means they're illegal, which means they're outside the law. That's what extra legal means, outside the law. You're intimidating me, man. You gotta smile. You're killing me. You crack me up, man. I love it. Number one is where the stop happened. Now, if you'll notice, part of the legal factors that we used was when and where the stop happened, right? Those two together have to be what we use. We can't just use where the stop happened. For example, you pull over a white person for driving in an African American neighborhood and on a particular street corner where they've known to stand and sell drugs. And you pull him over, and when you pull him over, you say, dude, I pulled you over because you're a white guy in a black neighborhood. What are you doing down here? That's an extra. That is an extra legal information that you. That's the only thing you got on this guy is he's a white guy in a black neighborhood. You cannot pull him over. Does that make sense? If the only information you got on this is he's African American in a white neighborhood, you can't pull him over. Those are extra legal circumstances. The place alone can't be a deciding factor of why you've engaged somebody, right? Number two, social class. Social class. And the guy in my first class this morning said they got pulled over coming out of the neighborhood, and the guy said, y'all are in a junky car in a nice neighborhood. What y'all doing? Social class. Absolutely is not a factor to pull somebody over. Obviously, race is not a factor to pull somebody over. Age is not a factor to pull somebody over. Unless you go buy a car and it's obvious it's a 12-year-old operating the vehicle.
Yeah.
At that point, you got some reasonable suspicion to pull them over, okay?
If they could even pull up.
Right.
Better call back.
Yeah. Most of them can drive better than the adults, right? Gender. Gender is not. You will have officers who pull over. You have females are not too bad to do this, but you'll have male officers who pull over 98% females. And try to get their phone number. Write them a ticket and say, hey, can I have your number? It happens. Not long ago, if y'all will remember, not long ago, they just convicted, I believe this guy was in St. Louis or Kansas City, I don't remember where he was at. They just convicted a white guy for working in minority communities, pulling over, he was profiling African American women, pulling them over, and telling them that if they would have sex with him, he wouldn't write them a ticket. So he would rape these women and then send them on their way. He just got convicted of that and put in prison not long ago. So, it does happen. And his logic behind it was, I'm pulling over poor, African American, uneducated women. Who's going to believe them? Who's going to believe them? And it did take a little while, but they got him. He didn't get by with it. And the last thing is there's two things: physical size and suspect demeanor. size is number 6. Suspect demeanor is number 7. You cannot interact with somebody because you don't like the fact that they're 7 foot tall or that they weigh 500 pounds. I do know people who just absolutely despise obese people. That is a racial, not a racial bias, but that is a physical bias that some people have. They just absolutely despise obese or heavy people. That's not a condition. I don't know many people who just absolutely hate very, very tall people, but what happens is a very, very tall individual is kind of like somebody driving a red sports car on the highway. If you're 6'6", you're 6'7", and you're in a group of people, guess who the officer's going to focus in on? You, because you're probably that much taller than everybody else, right? It's not right, but it does happen. Oh yeah, suspect demeanor. Folks, don't expect everybody you come in contact with to cooperate with you. It's not what happens. When you come in contact with these folks, fewer than 20% will actually be cooperative, especially in a situation where you're going to have to write a ticket or make an arrest. Not very many people are going to cooperate with you. Failure to cooperate with you does not absolutely mean they're guilty of something. Make sense? Failure to cooperate doesn't mean make them guilty of anything. Now, for the purposes of the study that I was reading, decision making in these racial profiling stops has been divided into, and this kind of touches on what you asked earlier, has been divided into 2 categories, high and low. High and low. Low decision making means that there is very limited opportunity for the officer not to make the stop. So that means the empirical data is right there. He's seen something, he knows something, or the time and place dictates that there's something wrong, right? So he don't have a whole lot of discretion. He knows something's wrong, he's got to make the stop. Yeah. Low decision making says that the opportunity not to make the stop is very low. In other words, the empirical data is there. You know what I'm talking when I talk about that empirical data? The empirical data is there. The empirical data says he either saw something, he knows something, or the time and place says something ain't right, we got to check this out. Right? The empirical data is all there. His opportunity not to stop the vehicle is very low. The high end says that this officer's performing this stop based on his experience and his own knowledge and not very much empirical data. The opportunity to make an inappropriate stop there is very high. So, I gotta hurry. We've had a good class today. Thank you all. Y'all been energetic and you've been engaging, and I appreciate it. We've had a good class. So, all of these factors, we've come together and we've talked about all these factors that can contribute, that do contribute, ways to avoid it. But police departments and communities have tried to come together to move this conversation from accusations toward each other and finding fault with each other to creating real police opportunities and real change in police operations. And here's what they've come up with. Here's the plan of action moving forward on racial profiling stops and racial bias stops in police work. They've begun by using community policing. Community policing is also akin to intelligence-led policing, which is what we just talked about not too long ago, right? Our intelligence-led policing is one of our classes we just finished up. In our intelligence-led policing, we have decided to work in partnership with the communities to start gathering officer contact data. Officer contact data. This new partnership with our community sends a clear message to police and to the public alike that racially biased stops will no longer be tolerated.
You said gathering,
Officer contact data.
what does that mean? Does that mean?
Every time you as a police officer have contact with the public, you're going to log it. You're going to log their race, you're going to log their sex, you're going to log what you believe their age to be, you're going to log where it was at, you're going to log what the circumstances were. This data can serve as an early warning system for the police departments, not only for racially biased stops, but also for other types of inappropriate behavior, like male officers only pulling over female suspects, use of force, inappropriate use of force, I should say. And the best part of this data serving as an early warning for misconduct is that the police can evaluate this and use it to begin to enhance their opportunities in police work in other areas, right? This data doesn't only serve as an early warning system, which is its main function, but it also gives a collectible data resource to use as they expand outward and get into other functions. Now, there are 7 difficulties with this data collection. Number 1 is racial designation. I'm going to tell y'all what happened to me, and I may or may not have told you this story before, but I'm going to tell you what happened to me when I was a dispatcher. And I'm kind of ashamed of this, but this is what happened. I was 20 years old. I really wasn't, I really didn't have the world experience that I needed to have. An officer pulled over a car. Car had New York plates. The officer asked me, what is this person's race? On his driver's license, when I run his 28, his race came back as Italian. I didn't know they did that. I didn't know that was an opportunity. Apparently it is in New York. Apparently you can put Italian on your, I thought it was, with white, black, Oriental. I didn't realize you could choose Italian as a designation. I didn't realize that. And I said, it says on his license plate that he is Italian. And the officer said, does that mean he's white or black? Well, I don't know. It says he's Italian. And so we begin to have this conversation over the radio. And I mean, what else am I supposed to tell him? I mean, here I am, a kid. I don't know. And so racial designation can sometimes be, we live in a melting pot now. Racial designation can sometimes be quite difficult. Racial designation can be a stumbling block to the data collection. Number 2, the cost. Number 3, officer disengagement. Officer disengagement. Officers will stop making stops at all, so they don't have to fill out that data, right? Instead of, because what you and I talked about earlier, Terry stops and other types of stops like that are very necessary in police work. It's a necessary part of what we do as long as it's done appropriately. And to stop doing those stops would be detrimental to police work. It would have a negative impact on police work. So disengagement of police officers, in other words, they stop making those stops, would have a negative impact on police work. Number 4, data integrity. Number 5, quality of data. Quality of data. Number 6, officer resistance. Officer resistance. And number 7, the use of the data. If a department uses that data for inappropriate sources, inappropriate reasons, it can be very detrimental. This data has to be, because it is sensitive on gender and sensitive on race, the departments have to protect it and take care of it very carefully.
How is number 6 different than number 3? Officers engagement versus officer assistance.
Officers still make the stops, they just refuse to fill out the paperwork and refuse to give you any good data. Now, the advancements with this are things like body cameras, car cameras, civilian videos. With these things in place, we can reduce police misconduct and improve citizen-police interaction. And the long-term effect is police departments and police officers no longer have what we talked about in the beginning. They do not have the, what was the word I used? Animosity. Citizens don't have that animosity toward police long term. All right? Questions? All of your test questions on Thursday, there's about 24 or 25 of them, plus a bonus question, will come from the notes you had today. Just today. We'll test on Thursday, and then I want you all to enjoy your spring break. Anybody got any questions? All right, good week. See you Thursday. Good class today, everybody. Good. Everybody did great. Who?
Anything still happens on the office?
Like it?
I'm gonna take it tomorrow, that's the other one.
I bet.
We'll take that. Are we all good?
Yes. Come to my office. Just make it 1:15, all right? And I'll be ready. 1:30? If I had some place to copy them. I don't have any place to copy them.
Yes. You go get you a flower.
Do they have a copy machine upstairs?
It's Women Appreciation Day, you better appreciate all of them.
They're appreciating it.
Without us, yo, we're not
They're
here.
appreciating the fact that next week's spring break and they don't.
Appreciate your sister, Brooke Series.
We'll go and see what we can do. Hey, Ms. Hall, you have a great day.
You too.
You like class still?
I do.
Hey, by the way, what's your number again? Because I was gonna call you.
Let's go.
Dribble?
Yeah?
Everything going good?
Yeah.
You feeling better?
I'm back on prednisone. For my leg this time. They don't know what's wrong yet, so, you know, throw some steroids at me. Steroids and. Hey, 4 milligrams.
Did y'all win or lose? Did you win or lose? I'm gonna bring my curriculum on Thursday, which was where you are this morning. Can I do anything to help you?
No, sir, just reviewing these notes and I'll send them to, Lee. Okay, I'm sure other people probably did too, but it's always good to get 7 copies.
It didn't hurt. All right, gentlemen. Y'all have a
Next time, sir.